Continuing on with this repair, this is a couple of days later. I've had a big long weekend and it's Labour Day has been and gone. It's time to get this thing done. So, ratchet pawl and things are all in place. This drive dog here, I'm just giving that a very light wipe with a bit of synthetic lubricant there. Let's roll that round to the front. The spring goes on the top. Get that seated correctly in the recess. That looks good. Then the ratchet cam. This controls the action of the film advance lever, allowing it to move in the forward position till it gets to the forward direction till it gets to the end of the stroke, and then only allows it to travel back to the park position. I know from experience that if I start that about there, with this cut out at about that point, or between here and here, that'll give me a good action on the return spring for the film advance. So carrying on here, just check that I've got the correct spring for this job, because there are two that look very much the same and the wrong one in the wrong place is no good. That's the right spring. A little coil spring. This one's slightly larger diameter than the other one. Although it does fit into that hole on this particular camera, normally they don't. It drops down in that hole. Just check I've got this right. No, it flaming doesn't. It drops down in this hole. It's the problem when you're doing cameras upside down so they appear the right way up to someone watching from across the table. That spring is the return spring for this little piece. I can see it's not particularly energetic either. That could cause a problem. I'm going to stretch that spring out slightly, because if it doesn't pop that pawl up very well, then I'll just give this a little bit of a stretch. Yeah, that's not going to overdo it. I just want to make sure that that's a bit more energetic. That's better. Otherwise it doesn't reset properly. Okay, so far so good. This piece. This piece has the transfer gear on it that couples the cocking rack to the film advance. I'm just forcing a bit of synthetic grease in there, and this sits on here. The tab on here holds down this lever so it can't lift right off. There are 3 screws. One at the end here. Let's get that in position. Up. That's better. Do that screw up lightly. Check that this lever is in fact tucked under here and nowhere else. there's one screw that goes down in the back here. It's always entertaining to get into place. It's sort of round the corner. It's hard to get the screw dropped in correctly. Oh, that's almost it. That's it. It's tipped into position. Get that screw started. Check that I've still got everything where it should be. That's looking okay. Now there's a return spring needs to go on here with the spiky bit pointing up. Now that spring is an odd shape. It's such an odd shape that you look at it, you'll assume that someone's made a mess of that spring, but that's not the case. It's just an odd shape. Let's rotate this to where I can see it. The spiky bit sticks up. Swing that around to there. Check that that's free on there. That's good. Those three screws can be done up tight now. This one, and the one down the back there. Now that spring that we've just put in place needs to go behind this lever, and that's done by pressing this down as far as it'll go, swinging the spring across, lifting it over the back of that spring. Now you can see that it acts against that spring. The gear goes on top of the film advance shaft. There's a plain collar that sits on there too. Now I'm checking the position of this. I've got no tension on this at all at this stage. I'm going to wind clockwise here, about a turn in this case, until this drive dog drops in at that point. Now that's all tensioned up, and with the film advance lever on in the start position, if you'd pressed the shutter release, that would drop that dog down to the lower position. Then you could swing your film advance lever, and then this pops back up when it gets to the end of the stroke, and it would allow your film advance lever to return to the rest position. So at the moment our film advance is sitting in the rest position, and the rewind, the film advance lever has about a turn of tension on it. Now I haven't cleaned that advanced lever yet. I'm certainly going to have to do that. Now the cocking rack can go in there. The cocking rack just gets fed in from the end. So first I'll apply a little bit of synthetic grease to it. And the cocking rack on the Retina IIa cameras are very robust, and contrary to some bullshit you will see spouted on the internet or read in books, it is not prone to failure. That slides in from there. If I swing my film to press the shutter release, swing my film advance lever till this pull pops up, and just a little bit further I can push my cocking rack into place, and I'm looking to see the point, but a bit of the grease is blocking my view there, but what I'm looking for is the distance that the rack sticks out beyond the tab at this point. Let's have a look at that from the front. That's about spot on. So that was just lucky. Otherwise you'd have to muck around shifting the rack one tooth at a time until you get it correct. Now something's odd here. Have I got my tension round the wrong way? I think I have. Let's just undo this. To tension the film advance, first we'll start with this in the start position. Which is there. Now I want to wind one full turn on here. That's fine. I'm holding that with my finger. Put the film advance lever on there, press my release, swing my lever, and it returns nicely. I'll just swing that out 90 degrees. I've got my cocking rack here, and the cocking rack I've just lubricated with a bit of synthetic grease. The cocking rack on a Retina IIa or 1A camera are very robust. They are not prone to failure, unlike some stories you'll hear. I'll just wind the film advance around until it reaches the point that the cam pops up. I'll take it a little bit further. I can put a bit of pressure on the cocking rack and it'll drop into place. And I'm just checking the alignment here to see how far the rack sticks out past that bracket. Let's have a look at that from the front. That's quite good. I think I'd probably be happier with another tooth further out, so I'm just going to go right round till that pops up, releases the rack as I come around a bit further right, let that come back one tooth, pick up the rack again and check, see where I am, know exactly where I started off. Let's have another go. That looks like it sticks out too far for me now, so I'm just going to go back where I was. I think I was probably right the first time. Yeah, that's where we were the first time. I'm quite happy with that. Right, so we press the release, swing the cocking rack, the film advance lever around 90 degrees. The film advance is held with this ratchet here, is holding that in position, so it's not going to fly away. And that film advance now is ready to be assembled. Now at this stage I've got choices. I could do the shutter and fit that in place, or the rangefinder and fit that in place and close up the body top. I think I'll pop the body to one side and start work on the rangefinder. The rangefinder. Let's pull back that spring and remove that pin. Remove the screw at the pivot, which you'll need a decent sized screwdriver. That's often quite tight. Plain washer on the top, a wavy washer, and the arm lifts off. We've got our bronze bush in the centre here, or brass bush. I find it convenient to mark the position of that brass bush relative to the arm, because sometimes it can make a difference to how things fit together. So I usually put a scribe mark across it like that. Those pieces can come apart. Now for cleaning purposes, there's various things I do. I'm going to clean the body of the rangefinder in the ultrasonic cleaner, and I know that if I was to leave this painted mask in place, the paint would clean away nicely and I would have a shiny piece of metal instead. So I'll remove that. I will also remove the prism assembly from the end here. If I can just lay my hands on the correct screwdriver. The correct screwdriver was there all along, right in front of me. Remove those two screws. The prism assembly just slides out of the end. Now on the Retina IIa, this is painted black on the back. I think it's silvered under that black paint. On the Retina IIIc types, that's a plain glass prism. All of the action is just total internal reflection. Not so on that one. At the back, we have a single screw that holds this plate in place. And that plate holds the rear lens in place. Now the rear lens is flat on one face, the flat face is to the outside here. Okay, there's the body of the rangefinder now with just a semi-silvered mirror in place. And I can see that the front surface of that mirror is exceptionally filthy. The back surface is not quite so, it's not much different. The inside surface, the one you see through this hole here, that's silvered. Do not touch it. You are likely to take the silvering off it. The outside surface, the one that faces to the front, is not silvered. That's plain glass. And as such, it can be cleaned easily. So I'm just going to clean that first here with a bit of window cleaner, because if that's the dirtiest part, that's the part that would take the longest to clean in the ultrasonic cleaner, and I don't want it in the ultrasonic cleaner any longer than necessary. Well, looking at that piece of glass now, I had assumed that there was a lot of dirt on the other side, on the silvered side, but looking at that now, just having cleaned the glass face on the front, it actually looks very good. So I'm a lot happier about that, and I know that that'll clean up very well. I'm just going to take off all this grease here with a bit of naphtha. That's from where the arm of the rangefinder's been sitting. And now I'll just clean this in the ultrasonic cleaner. And how I go about cleaning a little component like this is I have a small drinking glass. Into that I put hot water from the tap, a little bit of dishwashing detergent, just a couple of drops, pop this into it, and then pop that glass into the ultrasonic cleaner surrounded by warm water. Run the ultrasonic cleaner for 3 minutes, pull this out, run it under the tap to rinse anything away, blow out all the moisture that you can with a puffer, and then I just dry it with a hairdryer, using my puffer in intermediate if I see any droplets sitting on the glass. Any droplets that you dry on the glass will leave like a coffee ring behind it. Keep blowing them away with your blower, one of these rocket blowers or something similar, and just keep drying it with a hairdryer, and you'll find that you end up with clean, sparkly glass, just like they were designed to be originally. If you cooked something like this too long in your ultrasonic cleaner, what's likely to happen? Well, quite possibly silvering on the glass may disappear. The 2As are more robust in that regard than the 3Cs by a long shot, but certainly don't push your luck. Secondly, paint would start going. So where this has got black paint masking around it, that would just tend to be coming off in the ultrasonic cleaner too, so don't do it. Anything else in this body of concern? Well, this screw here retains a little lens that sits in a tube inside the rangefinder body here. Now, getting that correctly positioned is very difficult. So the best thing to do is don't disturb it and you won't have any trouble. Cleaning this body in the ultrasonic cleaner will mean that that little glass lens in there will get cleaned as well. It means you've got to do a fairly thorough job of drying this with a hairdryer, because otherwise you'll end up with a little blob of moisture in there and your rangefinder will look fuzzy until it dries out. You want it all blown out and clean, but I would recommend you don't disturb that screw. If you were exceptionally enthusiastic to do that and dig yourself into the shit, first you'd have to remove this mirror, which is held in with a spring clip, often with a couple of drops of lacquer, and that tube would slide out this end. I recommend you just don't touch it. I very rarely venture there, and I certainly don't see any great benefit in doing so unless there's an obvious problem that I need to deal with. If some insect had gotten here and crawled up and died inside that tube, then possibly I would have to do something about that, otherwise not. Right, off to the ultrasonic cleaner, back shortly. Right, I have this back from the cleaner. I've dried it with the hairdryer, and it looks pretty good, and certainly a vast improvement. So it should be a rangefinder we can see through. So now I've got to clean up the other components and put them back together. I'll start with the rear lens, or the eyepiece lens you could think of it as. So with a bit of glass cleaner, this is sitting flat on the paper at the moment, so the flat side is down. This is the convex side. Just cleaning that. And I've got window light coming in from beside me here on my right, so I can see what I'm doing. Here I'm cleaning the flat side, which is the outer side in our case. That looks good. I'll flip it back over. Check that the convex side is clean, no dust on it. Flip it over, drop it into place. The flat side out, convex side in. Just check that that's sparkly clean, looks very good. This mask goes on the back here. My semi-silvered mirror is pushed back in here. I just need to move that forward a bit, I think. That's better. Single screw. Yep, that's fine. That semi-silvered mirror is often locked in place with a little touch of lacquer. I moved that by pressing down on it when I was removing the screw here originally. I should have had it sitting up on a wooden block so that that wasn't pressing on the glass, but I didn't. Okay, so that looks very good. The mask can go on the front there now. That metal mask. And if you have damaged the paint on the mask, you can touch it up with some black paint, or black magic marker works just as well. You'd be lucky to see the difference. It's easy to scratch up the screw heads. Now here with the mask, what I'm making sure is that it's nice and square, and in particular that it doesn't extend down below this surface here where the arm on the rangefinder needs to swing across. That looks good at the moment. Just nip those two screws up. And the prism I want to deal with. So the prism, there are only two faces of the prism that we can get to clean. One is the obvious one here. And the other is the surface down inside the tube. So swirling my cotton bud around inside there, I can clean that surface. And then looking down into the prism from this direction, I've got light coming in from this side, I can judge the state of that prism surface and how clean it is. It looks good. There's just a tiny thread of cotton in there, which I've now blown away. So the prism can go back in place. And the clear glass face of the prism faces towards the front. The two small screws can go back in. These screws are used to adjust your vertical alignment. Make sure the prism is pushed all the way home in the housing. Run those screws down evenly. And the front face of the prism should be fairly flat, fairly square with the front face of the rangefinder body. That's a good place to start. You'll almost inevitably end up making changes from there. Right, so that part we can put aside. I need to deal with the arm. So for the arm, there's a couple of things we need to do. First, take some naphtha, clean the surfaces of the metal arm to remove the old grease and rubbish from it, and around the centre there where it runs on that brass bush. While I'm at it, I will clean the brass bush, the screw and the washers. And here I just want rid of all that old grease, which has almost inevitably gone dry and sticky. And I can feel grit on the paper here, so I know that there was an element of dust and stuff in there. Those components are good. Let's see about putting... next. Getting ahead of myself. I've got to clean the glass in the arm. So that front glass there. Again, I'm taking some domestic glass cleaner. The outside surface. That's nice and flat. I can judge by reflections how clean I've got that. The inside surface is quite dirty. Of course, that's the one that you can't get to with the arm in place very easily. Clean that. That's great. That's in a good condition. The assembly. Right, so a wipe of molybdenum paste around the inside of that arm. Put my bush in place. Now you'll remember that I'd marked the bush so I knew where it came from with a little scribe line across it. So I'll put that back where it came from. On this face, I'm just giving that a light wipe of molybdenum paste, the lubricant. Take my block of wood. Are we in the picture? Yeah, we're just in the picture. Right, lay the arm in position. That's a bit much. Just going to put a smear of molybdenum paste on that top surface where the wavy washer will sit. And you're not doing anything more than running a dirty mark of that really there. You're not applying great globs of greasy stuff. Put our plate on the top. And our fixing screw. Run the screw down, check that the arm moves, tighten the screw. Now we've got to get this pin hooked through the spring. So normally I just hang the rangefinder out so that the spring swings out. I can get the pin through it, through the end of the spring, stretch it out and drop the pin into place. So our pin is now sitting in correct position. And I can check that the arm moves freely, and it does. It moves freely back to the rest position, and the rangefinder is assembled. Now I'm going to peer through the window through the rangefinder and see what I see. Well, my secondary image, my moving image, is very, very high, which tells me that I've got to move my prism here, slacken off the front screw slightly, tighten the rear screw. Oh, I could tell that was quite loose. That was just floating. Let's try again. My secondary image is still high. My moving image, I should say. Still high. Now these adjustments you need to make are quite slight. A quarter of a turn would be a very big adjustment, so it's usually making smaller ones than that. Okay, so my vertical alignment's pretty good. My horizontal alignment is out. The infinity position, it's focusing back beyond infinity, I think. Let's see. Yes, by a considerable margin. So I've got to tighten this tiny screw here, which is reluctant. See how I'm looking. A bit more. Let's get that on there. In the picture, yes, just. The reason this can drift, there's various reasons this could be drip. One, somebody could have been playing with the adjustments, and slight differences in the distance that this prism might be relative to the body will also make a big difference too. So even though I pressed it back firmly into the body, perhaps I didn't press it back all the way. That's just about spot on now. This is our rest position, so that we want the rangefinder to never effectively go back past the infinity position. In other words, that at rest the rangefinder will correctly align infinity target. That seems very good. Final vertical alignment can only really be done in the camera, and that's because variations in how this arm couples with the pin on the camera body can effectively lift the arm slightly, which will affect their alignment. But otherwise that's good. It's nice and clean. You can see through it. The coincident images work very well, and they're aligned at infinity. And I need to clean up this top cover next.